Yo, I'm Candy, I be knitting, and today I be deep diving into my latest finished project, the Treysta by Steingass. This is a top-down circular yoke pullover sweater. It starts with a rolled stockinette collar, goes into a colorwork yoke, and then ends with some color work on traditionally length sleeves. The pattern, and we'll get into what I did versus the pattern, has waist shaping and then hip shaping that goes into a rather long body with color work at the bottom. I did not do the length that the pattern calls for. And then there is this color work at the bottom, and then it goes into some ribbing at the bottom. This was published in 2017. Today we are in September 2025. The original pattern was for, I believe it's pronounced Lina magazine, Laine, back in 2017. Jen Steingass now has the rights back to her, and so you can purchase it on Ravelry. The pattern goes for $8. I paid $6 just about because I bought the Winter Sole from her, another one of her sweater patterns that I wanted to knit, and she was doing, it was like her birthday or some sort of sale, so it was buy one get one half off. So on average I paid about $6 for this pattern. She often has sales as well. And what else about this pattern? There is also an errata if you do own the original Lina issue that this was published in, and that is available online as well. It has 7 sizes ranging from 33 3/4 inch to 49 3/4 inch with 2 to 4 inches of positive ease. So not really great on the inclusives of sizes. So maybe about 30 inches on one end of the spectrum up to 46 inches on the higher end of the spectrum. I have heard though that a lot of her color work is interchangeable, so if you have the numbers for a bigger sweater you could put this on there, but we'll come back to that concept later. It calls for 900 to 1300 yards of yarn, an Aran weight slash heavy worsted. Her version is in Let Lopey, and it's 18 stitches by 26 stitches, 18 stitches, 26 rows, size 7 needles, stockinette is the gauge. It is available in English as well as Norwegian. And the skills you will need for this, all your regular knitting, purling, casting on, binding off, but obviously the big feature here is color work. There are 4 colors in all in this sweater, and the most you're holding at a time are 3 colors. Overall, pretty easy. I would say that this could be someone's, well, it literally is my first time doing a circular yoke colorwork, or actually my first time doing a colorwork sweater. I've only done colorwork on small accessories, let me put it to you that way, and certainly my first time doing color work with more than one color. And so I found it to be incredibly easy to follow. There is maybe one area where you see these kind of baby blue medallions, I'll call them. These are 4 stitches wide. So if you prefer to catch your floats, you do have the option to catch your floats. I did not catch any of my floats. I didn't find it necessary. And I didn't find that if they had been 5 stitches wide, I probably would have catched my floats, because that's the conventional wisdom I was taught, but I didn't really feel like I had any long floats, certainly after blocking it. This is my wrong side. And thumbnail. Everything kind of lays relatively flat. When you get into like these 3 to 4 color areas, they're a little bit bigger, but I don't wear really showy jewelry. I don't have long nails. And so I don't really have that issue of catching my fingers into the floats. And like I said, everything appears to be laying rather flat after washing and blocking. So that's this. She does have some tips and tricks in the pattern. The pattern is 7 pages long, and she does talk about how to hold your yarn for 2-color color work. Not only is this my first time doing more than one contrast color on my color work, but I'm also an English style knitter. I hold my yarn in my right hand and I pick it up and I pull it around the needle with my right hand. And to do multiple color work, I had to embrace the continental yarn style, wherein I tension my yarn in my left hand and pick the yarn with my needle. And so I was holding, per her instructions, I held my main color in my right hand and any contrast color in my left hand. And I did English with my right hand, continental with my left hand. And then she tells you, you know, as you add contrasting colors, say you're working with contrast color 1, that becomes your dominant color. Or you can tension, you can have your main color in this hand and tension the yarns on your left hand, like, you know, 1 finger at a time. And by the end of this, I was pretty proficient at continental. I definitely will try that again in a different, I would like to do a whole project in continental because it does change my tension. So I was like picking up other projects, and I kind of had to just finish the color work on this because I was picking up other projects and changing my tension, and I don't want to do that, but I would like to pick a project and just start doing continental. Not because a lot of people like, oh, continental's faster, but because I do want to have a lot of tools in my arsenal, and for color work, I felt like it was necessary. You do have the option to like drop colors and pick them up if that is something that, you know, if working with both hands isn't accessible to you, that is an option. But for me, I found a lot of comfort in mastering that continental technique. And also I hear that continental knitting is a little bit more ergonomic. On that note of color work and color dominance is what we're getting at when you hold one yarn in one hand and one yarn in the other. She recommends doing the contrast color, the main color in your right hand, contrast color in your left hand. But I was talking about color dominance as it relates to color work. So in the pattern, and conventionally speaking, one would hold the background color, or what's usually the main color, in the right hand and the contrast color in the left hand. And you can see here that my background color is this purple color, and then I have all these 3 different contrast colors here. And I just wanted to really quickly share my thoughts about color dominance. I knit English style with my left hand, and I tend to be a very tight knitter. When I do continental style with my left hand, picking the yarn out of my left hand, those stitches tend to be a bit looser. So I believe what happens here is the tighter stitches of the background recede into the background, and the larger stitches come out into the foreground. And so color dominance and the whole idea of main color right, contrast color left is not a hard and fast rule. So my suggestion would be swatch with color dominance in mind. Traditionally speaking, one would want this design to be popping out with the background colors receding, but maybe you do want to switch it up. And the only way you're going to know that is by seeing how your knitting style shows those colors. And so and I'm also the kind of person that's like, okay, well, what if I did it the other way? You know, and so I have played around with tension and knitting style to see like, okay, what is the truth with this color dominance thing? At the end of the day, My only hard and fast rule is just to be consistent, because it becomes very obvious that something's going wrong if someone is switching their hands and switching how they're holding the yarn. And so for the entire project, either main color or the past contrast color was in my right hand, and then whatever the new contrast color was in my left hand. And it seemed to work well for me. But if your knitting style is either not consistent, or you knit some other way with some other tool, you may not have the same results by following the pattern exactly. And so definitely swatch. The other thing that concerned me going into this project was the gauge, because she calls for let low be, which I believe is more on the Aran side, heavy worsted side, on size 7. So it does create quite a stiff fabric. I did get gauge, and I do like the fabric that it creates in the stockinette, but for my color work, I did go up to a size 8, just because I didn't want to have to be constantly, I feel like I had to adjust my stitches and loosen things up. It was more natural to have that size 8 and not have to go back and be like, kind of pulling things apart, which, when I first started knitting color work was something I would have to constantly do, adjust my stitches and loosen them up a little bit. And so I was able to get a nice flow on the size 8 needles. The only exception there was on my cuff color work. I did not switch because I do knit small circumference on DPNs, and I just did not want to risk switching size needles, from a size 7 to a size 8, and having to like measure each needle and look at them really closely and end up mixing things up. So I was just very careful, keeping my stitches very loose on the sleeves, because it's literally only the 4 rows. So my Treysta, which Treysta apparently is Icelandic for the word trust. Besides that, I don't know the significance of it as it relates to this sweater. Mine, I did the size 4, which comes to 41 and 3/4 inches around the bust, and I used right over 1,000 yards all in all. My yarn I used Patons. Let me pull out my yarn I used. My main color was this purple color. It's a heathered Patons, and that's Patons Classic Wool. You can get it at every box, big box craft store. And I'm just pulling out my ball bands. Passion Heather. For some reason, I cannot remember this. I just don't think passion when I see this. But this color is Passion Heather. It's a worsted weight yarn. And then the other Patons I used is this green color, which is called Jade Heather. They're both from the heathered line of the Patons wool. And then it's in my lap always. The white is Wool of the Andes worsted weight. It's 100% Peruvian Highland wool from Knit Picks, and the color is, I believe, white. It doesn't have a color on it. 24065. It has a lot number on it too. So yeah, but it's white. It's literally like bright white. And then my last contrast color was this right here. And this is Good Wool, which is 100% Andean Highland wool from Good Wool is Pearl Soho. And this is Seaside Blue. And so what we end up with is this purple color, and then almost like a white background, and then it goes into these green medallions with this baby blue in the middle here. And with this Goodwill, I did read online that some people do use this yarn in worsted patterns, it gives more of a decay to me, but I held it double just because I was going up to the size 8 needles, and I really didn't want it to be holy and, you know, see all the scraggly floats in my color work. I ended up using I used about a third of 100-gram ball of this. The wool of the Andes, very little of this. This is probably what I used the least of. This was a full 50-gram ball, and you see how much I have left over of this. And I used literally, where is it? I might have, I think I had like one little chunk of this jade left over, and that was, I used 100-gram ball of this. The Let Lopi comes in 50-gram balls, so they tell you how many balls you need in the pattern, but it's really double because it's 50-gram balls. And so I used less than 50 grams of the white, less than 50 grams of the Seaside Blue, which is not the equivalent because I held it double. And then I used literally a whole 100 grams of this green. And then I used just about 4 balls of the purple or the Passion Heather. And I have this much Passion Heather left over of those 4 balls. Used just about a whole ball on the sleeves, and then about 3 balls in the body, 2.5 balls in the body. And so as I was saying before, this sweater has waist shaping, and so it kind of goes in at the waist and then goes back out. So you have like an hourglass shape, and then it goes down around the hips. So the body is about 15 inches. I did about a 12-inch body. And if you seen the pattern, this color work is right up against the ribbing, but I finished the sweater, I got the color work, and then I did my ribbing, and then I finished my sleeves and tried it on. And it wasn't that the body was too short, but because I went up in my color work to get the stretch I wanted in the body, it made the yoke a little bit deeper. So it ended up that situation where you have a circular yoke and you're raising your arm and you're showing just a little bit of belly. And so after I finished my sleeves, I did go back, and I didn't want to redo the color work. So I just put it back on needles here, ripped out the ribbing, and added an inch or 2 to the bottom. I like it a lot. I did do the waist decreases just because I am a bit more hourglass shape, but I didn't do those hip increases just because I didn't want it to be that much emphasis of an hourglass shape. And I do feel like that silhouette is a little bit dated. But overall, my feelings on the pattern, I loved it. I really, really enjoyed it. This is like me kind of gearing up for more color work. You know, this is my first kind of foray into this, and I wanted it to be kind of a low stakes pattern. Like I said, I just bought the pattern because it was 50% off, and I really, really enjoyed it a lot. I definitely will knit it again. I think the idea behind the waist shaping is that then if you do the hip increases, then you can make it into like a full length wool dress. And I do like the idea of doing that. The other thing here is this rolled collar. I was not sure about this, and I mentioned that before, that I was not too keen on that, and I was going to add in the ribbing later, but it does have a certain styling to it that I think is going to go well. Usually in the winter time, I'm always kind of wearing a sweater. My favorite outfit is like jeans, a button down, a sweater, and usually like a puffer vest. And I think with this rolled stockinette collar, it's gonna look really nice with like a crisp button down coming right over the top. And it's just a little bit more open up here. And so it's very relaxed. I did pretty much everything else to pattern. My sleeves are a bit longer than I would usually have them. And so it's kind of like just this kind of like a fancy sweatshirt vibe, because it does have like full-on color work, but it's also a little bit more of a relaxed fit. Also because I did go up that size 8 for the color work. But yeah, I think it's gonna look really nice. The other thing I did here, probably can't see it, and that's the point, is that I added a crochet chain to the inside of the collar. And the only way I did that is I took the crochet, pulled up a loop in the collar, created a loop, and then I went 2 stitches over. So I picked up every other stitch with the crochet chain and made a chain around the collar, and it took it from being about right here to being just about where my collarbone is, and I think that's gonna be a good look. I have found, not just with this pattern, but the last few things I have worked on, they say the pattern calls for size 7 needles for most of the body, and then size 6 for the ribbing, which I did. But you do also, one of the other materials is a size 5 needle, and they say that, I say they, Jen Steingass, has you cast on your neckline with the size 5 needles, but she says cast on loosely. And the thing that I have found in the last handful of patterns that I have made is when it says cast on loosely, bind off loosely, I'm overcompensating. I think I just need to do it the normal way that I usually do things, because it's coming out too loose. Like I'm just like, oh, it just said cast on loosely, so maybe let me make this like the loosest cast on that I've ever done, and I don't think that's necessary. When I first started knitting, everything was super, super tight. My stitches were so tight that I couldn't get my needle in them, you know, on the first row before, when I first started knitting. And I don't think I have that problem anymore. And so I think I can just do a normal stretchy cast on, do a normal stretchy bind off, because like I said, the last few things I've worked on, I've been like, oh, they said to do it loosely, and I've done it loosely, and it was way too loose. And and also I didn't really know going into this pattern how it was gonna come out. And so now that I know, you know, how my gauge is, how the sizing works, I could have just done my normal German twisted cast on, and it would have been fine. I was just like very, very loose with it, and I could have just tightened it up a lot. But the crochet chain works well. Yeah, overall, I think this is gonna work well for me. It's not totally I'm still not 100% sold on it as far as like the sizing goes. It's a little big on me. I do like a snugger fit, and this is, like I said, my first time knitting a color work yoke, so I'm gonna have to wear it a few times to see how it works out. This is on the list of maybe this becomes a gift to someone, just because it was an experiment. This was all yarn that I got from, except for the knit picks. This knit picks I ordered intentionally for another project, but for the most part, this is, you know, scrap RVA, thrift store yarn, and just trying to find some worsted weight yarns to put into a colorwork sweater. And so I don't know if I'm gonna keep it long term, but I am definitely gonna wear it this winter and see how I feel about it. It was mostly just an experiment to see how colorwork sweaters were gonna work for me and what I need to do. And now I know what I need to do, and I know how Jen Steingass patterns work. Great pattern, well written. I do like she tells you to knit, to pick up those extra stitches for your armpit so you don't have holes in your armpit. She also does the sleeve decreases in a way that I have not done before. I don't know, you know, obviously, you know, there's nothing new under the sun, but it was my first time coming across the way she does the numbers for the sleeve decreases, and I was like, huh, that's interesting. I'd be interested to see how the sleeve looks, you know, numbers wise and shape wise compared to some of my other sleeves. So that was cool. My only beef with the pattern is the sizing. It came out in 2017. Since then, most of her patterns go up to at least a 60-inch bust, which is, you know, kind of like the minimum as far as size inclusivity goes. And I know a lot of designers don't really bother to go back and expand their size range. And so I would suggest Jen Steingass, but maybe find a pattern that has a bigger range of sizes. It was on me. I didn't look, I I was just like, oh, should I buy a second pattern? It's 50% off. And I kind of just bought it on impulse without really looking at the pattern. So much so that I honestly thought from her pattern pictures that there were only 2 contrast colors. And then I downloaded the pattern, looked at it, and realized that one of them was a light gray and one of them was a dark gray. And so I just was purely going on vibes. So I definitely suggest you do a little bit more reading if size inclusivity is something that matters to you. I do have the Ventersol queued up, which she has expanded the sizing in that. I will knit this again just because I just found I really enjoy the color work. As I'm sold, like I almost did not do the color work on the cuffs and on the bottom just because I didn't like from a fashion standpoint how it looked, but I literally had so much fun knitting the yoke that I wanted to do more color work. And so I am looking forward to just playing with different colors and seeing what happens, playing with color dominance. What does it mean to have the pattern recede a little bit? I would love to do it. You see how the white is kind of a background color. I would love to do where the green is, do it in white. I saw a lot of pattern picture or project pictures on Ravelry where people did the white where my green is, and it almost looks like a photo negative. And, you know, and then you add in playing with color dominance that way. And what does it mean to have the outline jumping out at you instead of like the medallions jumping out at you? Certainly something to consider. The only other thing I wanted to show y'all, let me look at my notes really quick, make sure I covered everything. Color dominance. Oh, another note on this. I feel like I've talked about this sweater because I've featured it fairly recently. So if I don't cover something, let me know in the comments if you had a specific question about something. But yeah, I do definitely want to try it as a dress, try it with different color combos, you know, play with my tension and maybe do a smaller size for myself. The only other thing I want to talk about was my sleeve because I mentioned before I do DPNs in small circumference, and it's just the way I learned to do small circumference. It's the way I started. So it's kind of like being an English style knitter. I never bothered learning any other way because it works for me. Before I do another small circumference sleeve, I've done colorwork socks with DPNs and it's fine. But something about the sleeves, my DPNs, like everyone always tells me, oh, I couldn't use DPNs because they would fall out. I'm like, I've never had an issue with my DPNs falling out. Trying to hold proper tension with multiple, like we have 1, 2, 3 colors I was holding. I'm definitely going to do magic loop the next time I do a colorwork sleeve, just because it was just too much management of things. It's 5 needles plus 3 strands of yarn, and I'm just like kind of just I barely made it. I was like just holding everything together like this, and that was another. I was like, I can't add on to this switching from size 7 needles to size 8 needles. I'm just gonna keep going with size 7 needles and hope everything blocks out fine, and it did. It's fine. I would not have liked this level of tension on around my shoulders, but it works for my wrist. I have rather slender wrist, so it's fine. But yes, the next time I do colorwork sleeves, there will be some magic loop. I have knit with magic loop and quickly switched back to DPNs just because, like I said, that's my comfort zone. But I think it might be time for me to embrace magic loop. Yeah, so that's mostly everything I want to talk about. The only other thing I want to show you, my ball bands were inside of here. This is my Coco Knits little folio thing that I keep my pattern in. And also for this pattern, let me show you a page. The pattern also has a schematic, and I'm very much team schematic. I'll show you this. You won't be able to see much with this. I used these clear sheet protectors for the pattern because, like I said, this has been my first colorwork yoke. And then this is what it looks like with nothing in it. And so I knew that I was going to be really relying on my pattern and pulling out my pattern constantly. And if I made a mistake, I didn't necessarily want to be marking up my pattern and getting myself confused. And so I put them inside of this sheet protector. And then I just use little Post-it notes to mark where I am on the pattern, and it sticks nicely to the plastic, and but it keeps the pattern protected. And then you can use the pattern multiple times and it lasts a little bit longer. But I just knew getting it crumpled up in my bag and then having to pull it out and looking at it, and you know, usually I would like put a line through each colorwork line, but I have found if I'm marking up my pattern and then making mistakes and having to go back, it's better to just start with a fresh pattern. And so I was just like, let me just start off on the winning team and put the sheet protectors on there. Luckily, I didn't have any like major issues. Maybe I dropped a stitch here or there, but for the most part, it was very much smooth sailing. I mean, the pattern is quite symmetrical, so it's very easy to see if you're going wrong in some place or your stitch count is off somehow. But it worked out very well. It was just like the most drama-free experience for my first colorwork sweater. So I couldn't have asked for anything more, except for maybe a couple of more sizes. And also I felt like the sizes were kind of close together. And it also might be a function of being in line of magazine, because usually, from my experience, books and magazines have kind of limited sizing because they have limited real estate. You know, there's only so much typing they can do, and it's only so small you can make the text. And so that is that. I'm gonna leave it here. Have you done a colorwork yoke before? What are your thoughts on color dominance? Do you just do it the traditional way? Are you a left-handed knitter, and is color dominance different for left-handed knitters? I would love to know that. Other than that, I hope you're enjoying your fall. Once again, I'm Candy B. I be knitting. I be Rulude, at Rulude on Instagram. Candy B Knitting on Blue Sky. Candy B Knitting on Ravelry. So if I did not mention something here, I will have my Ravelry notes for this project posted. And until next time. Oh! That's the thing I wanted to talk about, this yarn. Psych you out every single time. Patton's Worsted is one of my favorite yarns. I love it. I collect it all the time. The Goodwill, nothing really to write home about. I did want to mention, because I was also watching, I want to say I was watching Haley Quinn, Lock Knits. If I'm mistaken, I apologize. But I was not a big fan of the Wool of the Andes for color work. It just was very smooth, and it did not bloom, and the stitches kind of like it's pixelated, but it kind of comes together in like this really nice picture down here with all the other wool. But for some reason, the Wool of the Andes just doesn't. It might be really good for cables or something else, but for the color work, the stitches just stayed very rigid and didn't kind of smooth out the way I would have wanted them to. So that was my other note. That was the only other thing I wanted to talk about, was the yarn I used. Now you can go. After you do all of the YouTube things, like subscribe, share this video with a friend, share this video with an enemy. Until the next time, peace.